Hey, my beautiful creatures. Welcome back. It's Ava. I've been a collector of human secrets for a long time. I've seen marriages that look like glossy magazine covers on the outside, but smell like rotting wood on the inside. But the story sitting in my inbox today, oh, it's a masterclass in absolute cold-blooded female resurrection. We're looking at a woman who crawled out of a watery grave, looked at her billionaire husband, the architect of her demise, and decided that karma was taking too long, so she'd just do the job herself. Let's dive into the anatomy of a perfect revenge, shall we? The sunlight bleeding through the floor to ceiling windows of our Manhattan penthouse felt entirely wrong. It was too warm, too blindingly golden, for a woman who, just moments ago, had been swallowed by the freezing pitch black waters of the Atlantic Ocean. I lay perfectly still against the high thread. Count sheets, my chest rising and falling in shallow, measured breaths. My lungs still carried the phantom burn of salt water. Me fingertips still remembered the desperate, bloody scrape against the steering wheel as the car sank into the abyss. I remembered the heavy, crushing weight of my unborn child, and the absolute, suffocating despair of knowing my entire family, my father, my brother Sebastian, my sister Victoria, were all dead, driven to bankruptcy, driven to suicide, driven to the grave, all because of the man currently sleeping soundly beside me. I turned my head slowly. Logan Vance, the tech and real estate prodigy, the ruthless billionaire who had charmed his way into the impenetrable circle of the East Coast's oldest money, the Sterling family. His sharp jawline was relaxed in sleep. His dark hair tousled in that effortlessly boyish way that used to make my heart skip a beat. Now, looking at him, all I felt was a cold, venomous clarity. Today was our third wedding anniversary. I knew this because, in my past life, this was the exact morning I handed him the knife to slit my family's throat. "You are awake," Logan murmured, his voice a gravelly, intimate whisper. He didn't open his eyes, but his heavy arm draped over my waist, pulling me flush against his chest. He pressed a soft, lingering kiss to my temple. "Happy anniversary, my love." He was so gentle, so sickeningly perfect. If I didn't have the memories of him standing over my father's casket, checking his Rolex with a look of barely concealed triumph, I might have fallen for it again. If I didn't remember the night I chased his car in the pouring rain, begging for my family's survival, while he drove off to comfort his true love. Chloe, I might have smiled. Instead, I felt a visceral wave of revulsion. I carefully slipped out from under his arm, wrapping a silk robe tightly around myself like armor. "I'll order coffee," I said, my voice eerily steady. Logan shifted, propping himself up on one elbow. The sheet pooled around his waist, showcasing the athletic build he worked so tirelessly to maintain. He offered me that trademark, devastatingly handsome smile, the one that had fooled Wall Street, the media, and me. "Don't go too far," he said, his eyes tracking my movements with a predator's lazy focus. "We have a few things to celebrate today, and a tiny bit of housekeeping before I head to the office." There it was. The trap, he gestured toward the mahogany nightstand on my side of the bed. Resting perfectly in the center was a sleek leather folder. "The proxy transfer for the Sterling Family Trust," Logan said casually, as if he were asking me to pass the salt. "I had my legal team draft it up last night. Your brother Sebastian is putting too much pressure on you with the board meetings. Isabella, you're my wife. You shouldn't have to stress over shareholder margins and acquisition votes. Sign your voting rights over to me, just temporarily. Let me carry the burden for you." In my previous life, I had looked at him with teary, grateful eyes. I had thought he was my protector. I had signed that piece of paper without reading a single line, handing a street. Fighter from a new money background, the ultimate key to dismantle a century. Old empire from the inside out. I walked over to the nightstand. I picked up the folder. The leather was cold against my skin. A burden, I repeated softly, testing the word on exactly. Logan threw the covers off and stood up, walking toward me. He reached out, his large hands gently massaging my shoulders. You have a gentle soul, Isabella. You aren't built for the bloodbath of the boardroom. I am. I'll protect your family's legacy. You know, I'd do anything for you. I looked down at the document. Then, I looked at the Mont Blanc pen resting beside it. I picked up the pen. Logan's thumbs pressed a little harder into my shoulders, a micro-expression of eager anticipation flashing across his face. He was holding his breath, the great Logan Vance, moments away from securing his ultimate prize. I didn't uncap the pen. Instead, I let it slip from my fingers. It hit the hardwood floor with a sharp, hollow clatter. Logan's hands froze on my shoulders. Dropped it, he noted. His tone slightly strained. He made a move to bend down and retrieve it. Don't bother, I said, stepping out of his grasp. I turned to face him, my expression a mask of absolute, chilling indifference. I am not signing it. Logan paused. A flicker of genuine confusion crossed his features, quickly masked by an indulgent, patronizing chuckle. Isabella, darling, we discussed this. It's just a formality to keep Sebastian off your back. Sebastian is my brother. I cut in, my voice slicing through the air like a scalpel. And the sterling trust is my blood right. I would sooner burn it to the ground than hand the matches to an outsider. The temperature in the room plummeted. Logan's smile vanished, completely wiped away. The charming, doting husband was gone, replaced by the calculating shark I knew he truly was. His jaw tightened, a small vein pulsing at his temple. An outsider, he repeated, his voice dropping an octave, laced with a dangerous edge. I am your husband. Are you? I tilted my head, studying him, as if he were a specimen under a microscope. I watched the slight twitch of his left eye, the way his fists subtly clenched at his sides. He was losing control of the narrative, and it was tearing him apart. I reached for my left hand. Slowly, deliberately, I slid the 5-carat flawless diamond engagement ring and the platinum wedding band off my finger. Ladies, let's talk about the audacity of a man who thinks a 5-carat rock is a muzzle. Logan really thought he could buy her compliance with a shiny trinket while he dismantled her family. Men like him rely on the illusion of the fairy tale, but the moment a woman unplugs from the matrix and takes off that ring, the power dynamic shatters. Isabella didn't scream. She didn't cry. She just dropped the hardware. There is nothing more terrifying to a narcissistic man than a woman who suddenly realizes she doesn't need his script anymore. Logan's eyes widened, tracking the movement. Isabella, what the hell are you doing? Is this a joke? If you are upset about me cancelling our trip to Paris, I told you the tech merger. Save the breath, Logan, you are going to need it for the deposition. I dropped the rings onto the leather folder. They landed with a heavy, final thud. I want a divorce. Silence crashed over the penthouse. It was a deafening, suffocating silence. Logan stared at the rings, then slowly raised his eyes to meet mine. He was waiting for the punchline. He was waiting for my eyes to well up with tears, for my bottom lip to tremble, for me to demand more of his time and affection, like the desperate, love-starved girl I used to be. But I gave him nothing. My eyes were as dead and cold as the ocean floor. A divorce, Logan scoffed, a harsh, humorless sound escaping his chest. He took a menacing step forward, using his height to cast a dark shadow over me. "Because I asked you to sign a piece of paper. You are being hysterical, Isabella. You need to calm down." "I have never been calmer in my entire life." "You don't mean this." He reached out, his hand snapping out to grip my wrist. It wasn't a gentle touch. It was a vice, a physical manifestation of his need to possess, to control. "You love me. You'd never leave me. In the past, that grip would have bruised my skin and my spirit. I would have cowered. Today, he didn't even flinch. I leaned in, closing the distance between us until I could smell the expensive mint and dark coffee on his breath. "I don't love you, Logan," I whispered, every word dripping with a toxic, lethal calm. "I look at you, and I feel absolutely nothing but pity. You can play the refined gentleman all you want, but underneath the bespoke suits, you are still just a desperate, greedy little boy pressing his nose against the glass of a world he will never truly belong to." Logan's face drained of color. The insult hit him exactly where he was weakest, his crippling inferiority complex regarding his new money status. His grip on my wrist trembled, his eyes flashing with a violent, unhinged fury. The mask was entirely shattered. "You think you can just walk away from me," he hissed, his voice vibrating with venom. "You think your precious sterling name can protect you from me." I yanked my wrist out of his grasp with a violent, sudden force that left him stumbling half a step back. "It won't have to," I said, picking up my phone and turning my back on him. "Because by the time I am done with you, Logan, you won't have the power to protect yourself. Check your email. My lawyers just sent the preliminary dissolution papers. And Logan." I paused at the bedroom door, glancing over my shoulder. He was standing frozen by the bed, staring at me as if I had suddenly grown horns. The panic in his eyes was the most beautiful thing I had ever seen. "Don't bother going to the office today," I added with a razor-thin smile. "Sebastian has already frozen your access to the sterling joint accounts. Welcome back to the bottom." I walked out, leaving the door wide open, and the sound of something heavy shattering against the wall echoed through the penthouse behind me. The wrought, iron gates of the Sterling estate loomed through the morning mist, a towering monument of black metal and centuries, old wealth on the coast of Long Island. As my driver navigated the winding gravel-lined driveway, I stared at the sprawling limestone mansion. In my past life, I had watched this very estate get auctioned off to the highest bidder. I remembered the sickening thud of the auctioneer's gavel, the vultures of Wall Street picking over my family's bones, and the smug, victorious smile on Logan's face as he purchased my childhood home for pennies on the dollar. Not in this lifetime. I stepped out of the car, the crisp ocean breeze biting at my cheeks, clearing the last lingering traces of the Manhattan penthouse from my senses. I found them in the West Wing library. Sebastian was standing by the mahogany desk, his sleeves rolled up, a phone pressed to his ear as he barked orders at some terrified portfolio manager. Victoria was draped across a leather Chesterfield sofa, her sharp blazer immaculate, rapidly typing on her tablet. They were the titans of the Sterling family. Sebastian, the ruthless investment banker who could crash a market before his morning espresso. Victoria, the apex predator of public relations, who could bury a senator's career with a single leaked photo. In my previous life, Logan had systematically isolated me from them, feeding my insecurities until I believed my own siblings viewed me as a naive liability. By the time I realized they were the only ones who truly loved me, I was identifying their bodies in a sterile county morgue. Sell the shares and short the rest. I don't care if they bleed, Sebastian snapped into the phone, hanging up without waiting for a reply. He looked up, his icy blue eyes so much like my own, locking onto me. His annoyance instantly dissolved into sharp, hyper-focused concern. Isabella, what are you doing here? It is Tuesday. Victoria stopped typing. Her gaze swept over me, analytical and piercing. She didn't miss a thing. Her eyes zeroed in on my bare left hand. Where is the ring, Isabella? Victoria asked, her voice dangerously quiet. I walked over to the antique crystal decanter on the side table, poured 2 fingers of amber scotch, and took a slow, deliberate sip. The burn grounded me. I left him, I said. The library went dead silent. Sebastian and Victoria exchanged a look that communicated 1,000 words in a fraction of a second. Neither of them had ever liked Logan. They had tolerated him because I had begged them to, because I had been a foolish, love-struck girl who thought her husband was a misunderstood genius. Did he hurt you? Sebastian's voice dropped to a lethal whisper. The veins in his forearms strained. If he laid a single finger on you, I will have him breathing through a tube by nightfall. He didn't hit me, I said, setting the glass down. He did something much worse. He's trying to swallow us whole. I walked over to Sebastian's desk, turning his laptop toward me. Open the internal audit files for the Vanguard Tech merger. Specifically, look at the third-party vendor contracts. Sebastian frowned, his fingers flying across the keyboard. Isabella, what is this about? You hate looking at the financials. Just open it, I commanded. My tone was so devoid of its usual softness that both of my siblings paused. Sebastian opened the encrypted files. I pointed to a seemingly innocuous string of LLCs registered in Delaware. In my past life, Logan had gloated about this exact maneuver right before my father's heart attack. Trace the shell companies, I told him. Reference the board of directors with Logan's private holding firm, Vance Capital. For 30 seconds, the only sound in the room was the frantic clicking of Sebastian's mouse. Then he stopped. I watched the micro, expressions ripple across my brother's face. First, confusion. Then, a profound, sickening realization. Finally, a rage so absolute it seemed to suck the oxygen from the room. His knuckles turned stark white as he gripped the edge of the desk. He's siphoning the R&D budget, Sebastian breathed out, his voice vibrating with barely contained violence. He's been bleeding our tech division dry and funneling the capital into his own real estate acquisitions. He's using our own money to devalue our stock. Victoria was on her feet in an instant, her tablet forgotten. Is it actionable? Can we prove it? It's buried deep. But yes, it's corporate espionage. It's theft. Sebastian snarled, slamming his fist onto the desk. That son of a bitch. I knew he was a social climber, but I didn't think he had the spine to steal from Fei. He reached for his phone. I'm calling legal. I'm freezing every joint account, every line of credit, every single backdoor access point. He has to the Sterling network. He's done. He is financially dead. Wait, I said, my voice cutting through his fury. Sebastian paused, looking at me with a mixture of anger and protective panic. Isabella, don't tell me you want to protect him. He was setting us up to lose billions. I don't want to protect him, I said smoothly, stepping into the center of the room. The ghost of the girl who used to cry over Logan Vance was completely dead. I looked at my brother and sister, letting them see the absolute zero in my eyes. I just don't want to merely bankrupt him. I want to ruin him. I want him humiliated, isolated, and entirely broken. Victoria's lips curved into a slow, predatory smile. She recognized the look in my eyes. It was the sterling ruthlessness, finally awakened. Tell me what you need. Little sister, Victoria purred, pulling out her phone. I need the divorce leaked, I said. But not just a leak. I want whispers of financial instability at Vance Capital. I want his investors spooked. I want the board members of his upcoming Silicon Valley merger to receive anonymous tips about his liquidity issues. If he tries to pull a loan to cover the money Sebastian is about to freeze, I want the bank slamming the doors in his face. Consider him radioactive, Victoria said, her thumbs flying across her screen as she initiated the destruction of Logan's public image. By the time the markets open tomorrow, nobody on Wall Street will take a meeting with him. For the next 3 hours, the library transformed into a war room. I watched my siblings dismantle the man who had murdered them in another life. Every phone call Sebastian made severed another one of Logan's financial arteries. Every text Victoria sent poisoned another one of Logan's social and corporate alliances. It was a symphony of destruction, and I was the conductor. Around noon, the intercom on Sebastian's desk buzzed sharply. Mr. Sterling, the voice of the head of estate security, crackled through the speaker. We have a situation at the main gate. We're port, Sebastian said, not looking up from his monitors. It's Logan Vance, sir. He's irate. He's demanding we open the gates. He says his keycard was deactivated, and his car has been blocked by our perimeter vehicles. He's screaming for his wife. A dark, profound satisfaction bloomed in my chest. He was bleeding out, and he finally realized who was holding the knife. I walked over to the massive bay windows overlooking the front lawns. In the far distance, beyond the manicured hedges and the grand fountain, he could see the heavy iron gates, and there, pacing like a trapped, rabid dog, was Logan. He was out of his sleek Aston Martin, slamming his fists against the wrought iron. Even from this distance, I could see the frantic, disheveled state of his clothes, the tie ripped loose, the bespoke jacket discarded. The facade of the untouchable billionaire had completely evaporated. He had gone to his office, expecting to finalize his theft of my family's empire. Instead, he had walked into a slaughterhouse. "Should I have security physically remove him?" Sebastian asked, coming to stand beside me at the window. I watched Logan kick the iron gate, a pathetic, impotent gesture that only bruised his own foot. He looked so small, so utterly powerless. "No," I whispered, a chilling smile touching the corners of my mouth. "Leave him there. Let him scream until his throat bleeds. Let the staff watch. Let the neighbors see the great Logan Vance begging at our doorstep." I turned away from the window, leaving him to the cold. "We have a divorce to finalize, and I know exactly where I want him to sign the papers." The artisanal coffee shop in Tribeca smelled of roasted beans, oat milk, and desperate ambition. I sat in a secluded corner booth, a pristine manila envelope resting on the table before me. Behind the espresso machine stood Chloe Adams. In my past life, I had believed she was just a tragic, innocent girl who had accidentally stolen my husband's heart. I had even tried to write her a $5 million check to leave New York, which she had tearfully rejected, claiming she only cared about love. Logan had looked at her like she was a saint, and at me like I was toxic sludge. But death brings absolute clarity. After I died, the Sterling Intelligence Network, run by Victoria, had posthumously uncovered Chloe's true nature. She wasn't a naive barista. She was a calculated social climber who had spent months tracking Logan's running routes, his favorite coffee blends, and his deep-seated insecurities about being new money. She had engineered every accidental meeting. Today, he was serving her the man of her dreams on a silver platter. The bell above the door chimed aggressively. Logan stormed in. He looked horrendous. The 48 hours since I had left the penthouse had aged him 5 years. His usually immaculate hair was disheveled. His eyes were bloodshot, and the shadow of a heavy stubble darkened his jaw. The financial strangulation Sebastian had orchestrated was clearly working. Logan looked like a man who had been suffocating in a vacuum and had just spotted the last oxygen tank. He spotted me and marched over, his heavy footsteps drawing the eyes of several patrons. "You think this is a game?" Logan hissed, slamming his hands flat on the table and leaning over me. "My credit lines are frozen. 2 of my board members resigned this morning. You're destroying my company, Isabella, correction," I said, my voice smooth and unbothered. I didn't flinch away from his looming presence. "Sebastian is destroying your company. I'm just here to finalize the paperwork." I tapped the manila envelope. Logan stared at the envelope as if it were a bomb. The muscle in his jaw ticked frantically. "I am not signing a damn thing," he growled, lowering his voice to a threatening register. "You're my wife. You belong with me. Stop this tantrum, call your attack, dog brother off, and come home. We can fix this." "There is no home, Logan, and there is no we." I leaned back, crossing my arms. "Sign the papers. If you do, Sebastian will unfreeze the Vanguard assets. You'll lose your pride, but you'll keep your company if you don't. Well, you'll be filing for Chapter 11, bankruptcy, by Friday." Logan's face went completely pale. The realization that he had absolutely zero leverage was finally sinking in. He was a king without a kingdom, stripped bare by the very family he had tried to conquer. "Excuse me, sir. Would you like to order something? You are blocking the aisle." The soft, overly sweet voice came from right beside us. I looked up. Chloe had stepped out from behind the counter. A tray in her hands, her large doe eyes fixed on Logan. She was playing the brave, innocent bystander perfectly. Logan blinked, momentarily distracted. He looked down at Chloe, his eyes scanning her face. In another timeline, this was the exact moment he fell in love with her. The moment the pure barista stood up to the intimidating billionaire. I watched the micro-expression of intrigue flash in Logan's eyes. Even now, while his empire burned, his ego craved the adoring, submissive gaze Chloe was giving him. "We're fine," Logan snapped at her. Though his tone lacked its usual venom, he turned back to me. "Isabella, please. Let's go somewhere private." "We can't do this here." "I like it here," I said coldly. "It's fitting. You belong in the mud, Logan. Why shouldn't we end this in a place that smells like cheap syrup?" The insult landed exactly as intended. Logan's deep-rooted insecurity flared into sudden, blinding rage. The mask of the pleading husband shattered. "Shut up," he snarled. He lunged forward, his large hand clamping down on my upper arm with bruising force. "You spoiled, arrogant bitch. You are coming with me right now." The moment his fingers locked around my arm, the world tilted. I had planned to provoke him. I had planned to make a scene. But the second I felt the physical restriction, the phantom sensation of the freezing Atlantic Ocean slammed into my brain with the force of a freight train. An ironclad prenup with a morality clause is the ultimate girl's best friend. Better than diamonds. Honestly, Preston was so deeply marinated in his own audacity that he thought he could cheat on his billionaire wife with his basic subordinate and still walk away with half her empire. And let's take a moment of silence for Harper, the mistress who genuinely thought she was winning a prize. Honey, you didn't steal a billionaire's husband, you inherited a broke soon-to-be unemployed liability. Vivienne weaponizing Wall Street HR policies, instead of crying in divorce court, is the kind of dark feminine energy we should all aspire to. The car doors wouldn't open. The water was rising past my knees, my chest, my throat. It was so cold, it burned. The weight of the water crushing the windshield, * my breath hitched. A genuine, terrifying gasp tore from my throat. Me vision blurred. The edges of the coffee shop darkening into the pitch, black abyss of the ocean. Let go, I choked out. It wasn't acting anymore. My heart hammered against my ribs like a trapped bird. I couldn't breathe. I was drowning. I was drowning all over again. Stop making a scene, Logan hissed, yanking me upward. I screamed. It was a raw, visceral sound of pure terror that silenced the entire cafe. The clatter of espresso cups stopped. I wrenched myself backward with so much force that the table flipped, sending coffee and glass crashing to the floor. I collapsed against the wall, clutching my chest, gasping for air that felt like salt water. My whole body convulsed with violent tremors. Isabella. Logan froze, his hand still suspended in the air. The rage in his eyes evaporated, replaced by sudden, absolute panic. Isabella. What? Don't touch me, I shrieked, curling into myself, my eyes wide and unseeing, faith awater. The water is everywhere. * you killed them. You killed my family. Don't let me drown. The coffee shop erupted into chaos. Patrons were on their feet. Phones were whipped out. Camera lenses pointing directly at Logan, standing over a hyperventilating, terrified woman. Hey, back away from her. Man, a customer shouted. I am calling the cops, another yelled. Logan looked around, his face bloodless. He saw the smartphones recording his every move. He saw the horror in the eyes of the onlookers. He saw Chloe, the sweet barista, backing away from him as if he were a monster. No, you don't understand. She is my wife. I didn't, Logan stammered, raising his hands in surrender. But the court of public opinion had already delivered its verdict. The great Logan Vance was an abuser. A monster who drove his wife to a psychological breakdown in the middle of a coffee shop. The edges of my vision faded to black. The last thing I saw before the darkness pulled me under was Logan's face, twisted in absolute, helpless defeat as the sirens began to wail in the distance. The steady, rhythmic beeping of a heart monitor pulled me back to consciousness. I opened my eyes to a pristine white ceiling. The smell of the ocean was gone, replaced by the sterile scent of clinical antiseptic. Breathe, Isabella. You are safe. Victoria's cool, manicured hand rested on my forehead. I turned my head. I was in a VIP suite at Mount Sinai Hospital. Sebastian was leaning against the window, his arms crossed, his face a mask of lethal calm. The panic attack was real, I whispered, my throat dry. We know, Victoria said softly, though her eyes gleamed with a terrifying protective pride. The doctors called it acute PTSD, but your timing, little sister, was absolutely flawless. Sebastian pushed off the window and walked over to the bed. He picked up a sleek leather folder from the bedside table. The exact same type of folder Logan had tried to use to steal our company yesterday morning. The video of him assaulting you in the cafe went viral within 20 minutes, Sebastian said, his voice laced with dark satisfaction. Vance Capital's stock plummeted 12% before noon. His PR team is in total meltdown. Victoria smiled, a sharp, carnivorous thing. He was sitting in the police precinct for 3 hours. I sent our lead counsel down there. We gave him a choice, sign the papers. And we drop the assault charges and unfreeze his company's operational funds. Refuse, and he goes to Rikers Island while his empire burns to the ground. Sebastian opened the folder and placed it on my lap. I looked down. At the bottom of the dissolution agreement, next to the little yellow sticker, was Logan Vance's signature. The ink was jagged, the strokes chaotic, the signature of a man who had been forced to his knees with a gun to his head. I traced the signature with my fingertip. A slow, genuine smile spreading across my face. The chains were broken. I was free. The tarmac at Teterboro Airport was slick with a light autumn drizzle, reflecting the flashing beacons of the Sterling family's private Gulfstream jet. He stood at the base of the airstairs, the collar of my tailored trench coat turned up against the wind. For the first time in 2 lifetimes, I wasn't running away. I was taking flight. "Wharton is expecting you on Monday," Sebastian said, handing me a sleek, encrypted tablet. "I've preloaded the Sterling offshore portfolios and the upcoming biotech acquisition files. You're going there to study, Isabella. But make no mistake, you are now an active board member. You have teeth. Use them." "I plan to," I said, taking the tablet. The weight of it in my hands felt right. It felt like power. Victoria stepped forward, adjusting her dark sunglasses despite the overcast sky. She pulled me into a fierce, protective embrace. "The press is having a field day with Logan," she murmured against my ear. "His stock is bleeding, his board is in a panic, and he's socially radioactive. We left him just enough operational capital to keep Vance Capital on life support. He'll spend the next decade fighting off bankruptcy, slowly choking on his own mediocrity." "Good," I said, pulling back to meet her sharp gaze. "Let him choke. I don't want to hear his name again until I graduate." "You won't," Sebastian promised, his voice a low, ironclad vow. He turned and walked up the stairs of the jet. He didn't look back as the heavy cabin door sealed shut behind me, blocking out the noise of the engines and the damp New York air. He sank into the plush leather seat. I poured myself a glass of sparkling water, watching the runway blur past as the plane accelerated. When the wheels left the ground, a physical weight lifted from my chest. The phantom scent of the ocean, the crushing darkness of my past life, it all finally evaporated. I was 24 years old. I was a billionaire in my own right. I was free, 30 miles away. Logan Vance was tearing his Manhattan office apart. A heavy crystal decanter shattered against the wall, sending a shower of amber liquid and glass across the Persian rug. Logan stood in the center of the wreckage, his chest heaving, his tie discarded. His phone buzzed on the mahogany desk. He snatched it up, his eyes bloodshot and wild. It was a text from one of the few private investigators still willing to take his calls. "Facies at Teterboro. Flight logged for Philadelphia. She's leaving." "Asterisks no," Logan hissed, his thumb hovering over her contact name. He hit dial. It went straight to voicemail. He hit it again. Voicemail. His mind was a toxic cocktail of wounded pride, disbelief, and sheer panic. Isabella was supposed to be his anchor. She was the naive, sweet Sterling girl who looked at him like he was a god. She was his golden ticket into the upper echelons of society. She couldn't just discard him like a piece of trash. She couldn't just Fay-win Fay. "You don't get to walk away from me," he snarled to the empty room. He bolted out of the office, ignoring the terrified glances of his remaining staff. He took the private elevator to the underground garage and threw himself into the driver's seat of his Aston Martin. The engine roared to life, a mechanical beast echoing his own fury. Logan sped out of the garage, merging recklessly onto the FDR drive. The light drizzle had turned into a blinding torrential downpour. The rain lashed against the windshield, the wipers struggling to keep up. Logan's knuckles were stark white as he gripped the steering wheel, weaving dangerously between lanes. Fay just need to see her. Fay rationalized, his breathing shallow and erratic. Fay just need to get in front of her. If I can just talk to her, away from her psychotic brother, I can fix this. I can make her remember how much she loves me. Asterisk, he grabbed his phone from the passenger seat, not taking his eyes off the road, and hit redial. Faye voicemail. Asterisk, pick up the damn phone. Isabella, he screamed, slamming his fist against the steering wheel. The distraction lasted exactly 1 second. When Logan looked back at the road, the red taillights of an 18-wheeler were completely filling his windshield. The truck had hydroplaned, its massive trailer jackknifing across 3 lanes of traffic. Logan slammed on the brakes. The tires locked. The Aston Martin skidded across the slick asphalt, entirely out of control. There was no time to swerve. There was no time to pray. The sound of twisting, tearing metal was deafening. The airbag deployed with the force of a gunshot, but it wasn't enough to stop the crushing momentum. The dashboard buckled inward, pinning him. The windshield shattered into a million glittering diamonds, and then a profound, heavy darkness swallowed him whole. Fabe, beep, beep. Asterisk. The rhythmic sound of the heart monitor was the first thing to register. Then came the smell. Clinical, sterile, suffocating. Logan forced his eyes open. The harsh fluorescent lights of the intensive care unit blinded him for a moment. He tried to raise his hand to shield his eyes, but his arm felt like it was made of lead. Mr. Vance Pleastree, not to move. A doctor in a white coat stepped into his line of vision, his expression grave. Logan's throat was parched. He tried to speak, but only a dry rasp came out. He looked down the length of the hospital bed. He could see his legs under the thin white blanket. He tried to flex his toes. Nothing happened. A cold spike of adrenaline pierced his chest. He tried to bend his knees. He strained, sending the command from his brain with every ounce of willpower he possessed. Absolutely nothing. It was as if his body ended at his waist. What? Logan choked out, panic rising in his throat like bile. What is wrong with my legs? The doctor's eyes softened with pity, a look Logan absolutely despised. Mr. Vance, you suffered catastrophic trauma to your lower spine in the crash. The spinal cord was severely severed. We performed emergency surgery to stabilize you, but you are paralyzed from the waist down. I am so sorry, paralyzed. The word echoed in the sterile room. Logan Vance, the apex predator, the man who conquered boardrooms by towering over his rivals, would never walk again. He would spend the rest of his life looking up at people from a wheelchair. No, Logan whispered, shaking his head. No, fix it. I have money. I can pay whatever. Before the doctor could answer, a sudden, blinding agony ripped through Logan's skull. It wasn't physical pain. It was a violent, unnatural tearing inside his mind. He gasped. His back, arching off the mattress as a floodgate, burst open in his brain. Images, memories. But not from this life. Fahey saw himself standing in a cemetery, looking down at Sebastian Sterling's gravestone. He felt a twisted sense of victory. Fahey saw himself in a boardroom, signing the final papers to liquidate the Sterling empire, while Chloe, sweet, manipulative Chloe, rubbed his shoulders, a greedy smirk on her face. Feigned, then, the rain. Fahey saw himself looking in the rearview mirror of his car. Through the pouring rain, he saw Isabella. She was drenched, her bare feet bleeding on the asphalt, her pregnant belly heavy as she chased his car, screaming for him to stop, screaming for mercy for her family. Fahey saw his own hand turn up the volume on the radio to drown out her cries. He saw himself drive away. Fake finally, he felt the bone-chilling, soul-crushing horror of standing on a cliffside the next morning. He saw the police pulling a crushed, waterlogged vehicle from the Atlantic Ocean. He saw the white tarp draped over a body. He felt the absolute, world-ending realization that he had murdered the only woman who had ever truly loved him. All for a worthless, calculating mistress. The memories crashed into him with the force of a tsunami. They weren't dreams, they were real. They were a past life. And in a flash of horrifying clarity, Logan understood everything. Isabella's sudden change in behavior, the coldness in her eyes, the way she had perfectly dismantled his company in 48 hours, the way she had looked at him in the coffee shop and screamed about drowning. She remembered. She remembered what he did to her. She remembered the ocean. Logan stared up at the hospital ceiling, tears of absolute soul, shattering devastation spilling down his cheeks. The physical loss of his legs was nothing compared to the monstrous weight of the guilt that now crushed his chest. He opened his mouth, and a raw, agonizing scream of pure torment tore through the ICU. 3 years, that was how long it took to forge a weapon out of a broken girl. I sat at the head of the glass-walled boardroom on the 60th floor of Sterling Tower, the Manhattan skyline sprawling beneath me like a conquered kingdom. I wore a razor-sharp charcoal suit, me posture impeccable, me expression an impenetrable fortress. I was no longer the naive heiress who cried in coffee shops. I was Isabella Sterling, Wharton valedictorian, and the newly appointed chief strategy officer of my family's empire. And today I was playing the role of the executioner. The heavy oak doors of the boardroom swung open. The hushed chatter of my legal team instantly died, replaced by the low mechanical hum of a motorized wheelchair. Logan Vance rolled into the room. A collective, silent intake of breath rippled through the executives at the table. If the Logan from 3 years ago was a predatory shark, the man before me was a hollowed-out ghost. His cheekbones were sharp enough to cut glass. His tailored clothes hung loosely on a gaunt frame, and his eyes, once vibrant and arrogant, were sunken, burning with a feverish, haunted intensity. He didn't look at the lawyers. He didn't look at the breathtaking view. His eyes locked entirely onto me, filled with a desperate, suffocating reverence that made my stomach turn. "Isabella," he breathed, his voice a gravelly ruin. "Mr. Vance," I replied, my tone as warm as liquid nitrogen. I didn't stand. I didn't offer my hand. I simply tapped my manicured fingernail against the mahogany table. "You're late. Let's bypass the pleasantries. Sterling Trust is prepared to absorb the remaining liquidated assets of Vance Capital at 20 cents on the dollar. It's a generous offer for a dying firm." Over the past 3 years, Logan's life had become a masterclass in self-destruction. While I rebuilt my power, he had turned his remaining resources inward, tearing his own life apart with the frenzy of a madman. The corporate whispers said he had lost his mind after the car crash. He had ruthlessly purged his own board of directors. But his most vicious campaign had been reserved for Chloe Adams. He hadn't just fired the manipulative barista. Using his wealth and a terrifying obsessive focus, Logan had systematically dismantled Chloe's entire life. He hired private investigators to unearth every lie she had ever told, every grift she had ever pulled. He cornered her in a web of psychological warfare so intense that she had a public, violent breakdown. She was currently institutionalized in a high-security psychiatric facility in upstate New York, screaming to the padded walls about a billionaire who ruined her. Logan had destroyed the woman he once loved enough to kill for. And I knew exactly why, he remembered. "Leave us," Logan suddenly commanded, not breaking eye contact with me. My legal team hesitated, looking to me for confirmation. I gave them a subtle nod. Done by one, they filed out of the boardroom, the heavy doors clicking shut, leaving me alone with the man who had murdered me in another life. The silence stretched. Heavy and toxic Logan wheeled himself closer to the table, his hands resting on the armrests, where trembling violently. "I took care of her," he whispered, his voice cracking. "Chloe, she's gone. Isabella, she's locked away. She can never hurt you. I made sure of it." He looked at me with those hollow, bloodshot eyes, waiting for a spark of approval, waiting for absolution. I leaned back in my leather chair, clasping my hands together. "Did you expect a thank you note, Logan? You took out the trash. Congratulations on basic hygiene." He flinched as if I had struck him across the face. A ragged breath tore from his chest. "I remember," he choked out, a single tear spilling over his lower lash line. "God, Isabella, I remember everything. The rain, the crash, the water. I remember what I did to your family, what I did to Fifi. I remember watching you sink." His chest heaved, a sob tearing through his throat. The great Logan Vance, the terror of Wall Street, was weeping openly in front of me, his face twisted in absolute soul-shattering agony. "Every time I close my eyes, I see you running after my car," he cried, his hands gripping his lifeless legs. "I feel the water in my lungs. I know I deserve this wheelchair. I deserve the pain. But I am so, so sorry. I love you, Isabella. I have only ever loved you. Please, please just look at me. Just tell me you know how sorry I am." I watched him break. I watched him bleed out his confessions, offering me his guilt like a bleeding heart on a silver platter. I felt absolutely nothing. No vindication, no pity, just a profound, quiet boredom. "Are you finished?" I asked, my voice deadly flat. Logan froze, his breath hitching. He stared at me, searching my face for a crack in the ice. He found none. "You think your memories make you special, Logan?" I asked softly, leaning forward. "You think remembering the fact that you drove my family to slaughter and left me to drown in the Atlantic somehow earns you a redemption arc? It doesn't. It just means you finally get to live with the monster you've always been." "I want to make it right," he pleaded, his hands shaking as he reached into the inner pocket of his jacket. "I know I can't bring them back in that life, but in this one ... in this one, I can give you everything." He pulled out a thick, leather, bound document and slid it across the polished mahogany table. It wasn't the buyout agreement my lawyers had drafted. I glanced down at the bold, unforgiving text on the first page. I didn't need to read the legal jargon to understand what it was. It was an unconditional, irrevocable transfer of assets. "Everything," Logan whispered, his voice thick with desperation. "My personal accounts, the patents, the offshore trusts, every single cent I have left to my name. I've signed it all over to you. I don't want a buyout. I don't want a percentage. I want you to have it all. Just take it, Isabella, take it, and tell me that one day you might forgive me." He sat there in his wheelchair, completely stripped of his pride, his power, and his future. He had laid his entire existence at my feet, a pathetic sacrifice begging for a God's mercy. I looked at the trembling signature at the bottom of the page. Then I slowly raised my eyes to meet his. I looked at the trembling signature at the bottom of the page. Then I slowly raised my eyes to meet his. Logan's breath hitched in his throat. He was leaning forward as much as his paralyzed body would allow, his sunken eyes searching my face for a lifeline. A single tear, a softening of my jaw, a sigh of pity. He was starved for anything that would validate his grand gesture of martyrdom. Oh, the classic male martyr complex. He genuinely believed that handing over his bank accounts would buy him a VIP ticket to Redemption Town. Men will literally ruin your entire life, drive you to the bottom of the ocean, and then cry in a wheelchair, expecting you to be their therapist. Isabella giving him absolutely nothing. No anger, no pity, just pure unadulterated indifference. It's the highest form of self-love. She didn't owe him closure. His guilt is his own disease. I reached across the table and picked up my Mont Blanc pen. With a few swift, elegant strokes, I countersigned the asset transfer, legally absorbing the last remnants of Logan Vance's empire into the Sterling Trust. I closed the leather folder and slid it to the side. "Thank you for the capital, Logan," I said, my voice entirely devoid of emotion. "It will make a fine addition to our philanthropic division." Logan stared at the closed folder, then back up at me. The desperate hope in his eyes began to curdle into a raw, bleeding confusion. "Isabella, did you hear what I said? I gave you everything. I just want your forgiveness. I just want to know that before I die, you don't hate me." "Hate requires passion, Logan," I replied, leaning back in my chair. I observed him the way a scientist might observe a dying insect under a microscope. "I don't hate you. I don't feel anything for you at all. You are a ghost from a timeline I have already erased. But I remember," he cried out, his voice cracking. The polished veneer of the former billionaire entirely destroyed, he slammed a fist against his lifeless thigh. "I remember the ocean. I remember the rain. I am paying for it. Isabella, look at me. I'm in a wheelchair. I have nothing. I destroyed Chloe. I destroyed myself. Isn't it enough? When does the punishment end?" "You are fundamentally misunderstanding the situation," I said, my tone dropping to a lethal, quiet whisper. "You think your suffering is some kind of currency. You think if you bleed enough, cry enough, and hand over enough money, you can buy a clean conscience. But this isn't a transaction. Logan, your guilt is your own disease. Don't cough it up on me and expect me to be your cure." Logan's jaw trembled. The last flicker of light in his eyes extinguished, leaving behind a hollow, abyssal darkness. He finally realized the terrifying truth. There was no redemption arc. There was no tearful reunion. He had burned down his own world, and the ashes were his alone to sweep. "Please," he whispered, a pathetic, broken sound. "Please, Isabella. Just one kind word. Just one." I stood up, buttoning my charcoal suit jacket. I didn't look down at him. "Security," I said, pressing the intercom button on the table. "Mr. Vance is finished here. Please escort him to the freight elevator. He won't be returning." I walked out of the boardroom without looking back. Behind me, the sound of Logan's muffled, agonizing sobs echoed against the glass walls, a tragic soundtrack to his final defeat. It took another 8 months for the universe to finally collect its debt. Winter descended on New York City with a biting, ruthless chill. I was in my penthouse, a new one, overlooking Central Park, completely free of the ghosts of my past marriage. I stood by the floor, to ceiling windows, a crystal glass of Cabernet Sauvignon in my hand. The city was alive with the manic energy of New Year's Eve. Millions of lights glittered in the darkness, waiting for the stroke of midnight. My phone buzzed on the marble kitchen island. It was Sebastian. "Happy New Year, little sister." His voice came through the speaker, warm and grounded. I could hear the faint clinking of glasses in the background. He was celebrating at the Sterling estate in Long Island with Victoria and our parents. They were safe. They were thriving. "Happy New Year, Bash," I smiled, taking a sip of the rich red wine. There was a brief pause on the line. Sebastian's tone shifted, becoming professional, clinical. I just received a call from Mount Sinai. Logan Vance passed away 20 minutes ago. I looked out at the dark sky. Stomach cancer, wasn't it? Yes, stage 4. The doctors said it ate through him aggressively over the last few months. He refused visitors at the end. Died completely alone in his suite. Sebastian exhaled. The Vance family lawyers will handle the cremation. There won't be a public funeral. He's just gone. Understood, I said. My pulse didn't quicken. My hands didn't shake. Are you all right, Isabella? Sebastian asked. A hint of protective brotherly concern bleeding through. I've never been better, I answered truthfully. Give Mom and Dad my love. I'll see you at the board meeting on Monday. I hung up the phone. Logan was dead. The man who had once been the center of my universe, the monster who had driven me to the bottom of the Atlantic, had withered away in a sterile hospital bed, eaten alive by his own rotting cells and the inescapable memories of his sins. He had spent his final days orchestrating one last pathetic gesture. My assistant had informed me that Logan had prepaid a pyrotechnics company 100 years' worth of fees to launch a private fireworks display over the Hudson River every New Year's Eve, visible directly from my penthouse, a dying man's obsessive, unrequited love letter to the woman he had murdered. As the clock struck midnight, the dark sky outside my window erupted. Massive blooms of gold, crimson, and sapphire exploded over the water, illuminating the Manhattan skyline in a breathtaking, violent display of color. The glass of my windows rattled with the concussive force of the blasts. It was a beautiful display, but it didn't wash away the blood. It didn't buy him a single ounce of my pity. I raised my glass of Cabernet, holding the deep red liquid up against the light of the exploding fireworks. I didn't toast to Logan Vance. I didn't toast to forgiveness, or tragedy, or the bitter irony of fate. I toasted to my father, who was currently asleep in his own bed. I toasted to Sebastian and Victoria, whose empires were untouchable. And most importantly, I toasted to myself, the girl who refused to drown, and the woman who learned how to walk on water. Happy New Year, I whispered to my reflection in the glass. I took a sip of the wine, turned my back on Logan's fireworks, and walked into the warmth of my own unbroken life. You know, society loves a forgiving woman. We are practically programmed from birth to be the emotional sponges for broken men. We are told that forgiveness is healing, that holding onto anger is toxic. But let me tell you a little secret I've learned from watching 100 marriages burn to the ground. Sometimes, forgiveness is just a scam invented by the people who wronged you so they can sleep better at night. Isabella's story is intoxicating because she refuses to play the patron saint of second chances. Logan spent his final days rotting away, desperately trying to buy her attention with $1 million fireworks display. A grand, explosive declaration of love from a dying man. Romantic right. Wrong. It's just another form of manipulation. It's him screaming, "Look at me, look at how much I suffer for you." But Isabella, she just sipped her Cabernet and watched the pretty colors. She didn't let his guilt become her burden. She understood the most crucial lesson of surviving betrayal. The opposite of love isn't hate. It's apathy. When you truly heal, your abuser doesn't become your sworn enemy. They become a ghost. A footnote in the biography of a very successful woman. We don't need to fix the men who broke us. We don't need to hold their hands while they apologize for treating us like collateral damage. Sometimes, the most elegant thing you can do is sign the papers, secure the bag, and let them choke on their own regrets. Now, I want to hear from you, My gorgeous survivors, have you ever had an ex try to buy their way back into your good graces with a pathetic grand gesture? Have you ever looked at someone who broke your heart and felt absolutely nothing? Drop your stories in the comments below. Let's sip some tea and celebrate the men we left in the rearview mirror. Until next time, keep your standards high and your boundaries made of titanium. Stay ruthless. Darlings.